This study's about the results of rejection or non-acceptance, and the first thing that we want to look at is what we describe as a love vacuum, and this is a person who has not experienced either prenatally or in childhood, they haven't experienced acceptance. They will often be what is sometimes termed as needy. In other words, they always need some kind of help, support or encouragement from others. Now, sometimes these people will suck the life out of those around them, desperately trying to get you to meet the inner need that they have. And very hurt people can have like an emotional whirlpool that draws everyone and everything into it as a solution to their emptiness. This can include a propensity or a tendency towards lusts, possessions, acknowledgement from achievements, possessiveness, and even jealousy around relationships. So problems such as hoarding can fit in here, where a person may feel that the belongings connect them to the world where they otherwise would feel unwanted. And these people will often crave acceptance from parental figures such as ministers, or they'll worship a sports or a movie star, somebody like that. These people that they then place up on a pedestal become the centre of their lives as a kind of a replacement of the absentee key figures or father or mother image that they're looking for. Now, many times even homosexual tendencies can fit in here, with psychological studies reporting a high incidence of this behaviour being a response to not having received love and acceptance from a primary caregiver in the critical early stages of life. So, for example, never receiving a father's love, there's now a need to prove that you can receive love from a father, or in the case of perhaps a lesbian, proving that they can, that they're worthy and acceptable to be loved by a woman, and then their sexuality actually conforms to that. The need for acceptance and love can also be found as a strong motivator behind sex outside marriage, adultery, and even issues such as the epidemic of pornography. Now, these illicit movies offer men the emotional stimulus of these supposedly accepting women being pleased with the efforts of the men portrayed in the pictures. Having dealt with many men with this addiction, I've come to the conclusion that porn for men is primarily about the acceptance and success in relationships that they crave. Clearly, there's an additional highly exciting sexual stimulation component as a complication, and certainly something that keeps it going. But when men fear failure or rejection in relationships, pornography is an easy option where there's no risks or needs to deal with in terms of working through harmonizing in relationships. So in a twisted kind of way, often their emotional needs are met through seeing men receive the way that they would like to be and affirmed as they would like to be themselves. So men with healthy emotional, relational and sexual relationships at home weather out these worldly temptations effortlessly. But for men with, as I say, with a fear of rejection or a fear of failure issues, it's a great temptation. It's the path of least resistance. All right, with all of these things, the truth is that nothing, no person, no addiction, none of those things can completely fill this belief-based love and acceptance vacuum. Only God can bring wholeness to these broken hearts with his truth and love. And so there is a space in us that was actually made for God. And when we try to get through life without him, then we end up with an empty place there. All right, the second thing I want to look at is what we would term narcissistic behavior. Now, narcissism is defined as an abnormal love and admiration for yourself. Now, it's reasonably obvious that this is the person's solution to not having been loved, regarded, or treated as important. So from repeated dealing with narcissistic behavior, I've concluded that the underlying beliefs that are normally something such as, I'm not important and therefore not loved. Now, their own solution or countermeasure to this heart belief is that in their own eyes, not only are they important, they are in fact the only person who is important, and they are indeed the most important of all people. This is in essence love of self, and it's based on self-promotion in their own eyes, if you like. This being the case, it's natural that what they think, want, and do is of the utmost importance, and they have a tendency towards grandiosity, and usually they carry an inflated picture of their abilities and superiority as a human being. So there's just the simple implication of that is it places everyone else as lemmings or lesser humanity than themselves. Now, because self is now firmly on the throne, they're prone to the whole self syndrome. So they're self-consumed, they're self-centered, they're self-indulgent, self-justified, self-gratifying, self-important, self-protective, self-righteous, self-deceived, and you can go on. They're selfish. They may not have all of those elements, but there may be some present. Now, in a Christian setting, unfortunately, these people believe, for instance, that they're going to be mightily used as prophets to the nations, or carry a mighty anointing, or they're apostles or some other thing. Now, obviously, the inflated picture of themselves that they have, they then project that onto God and assume that they are greater than other people. So sadly, many of them are never used because they cannot begin with the small things. If you're faithful with little, you'll be put in charge of much. Well, they can't serve under authority because it's beneath them. All right, God himself opposes the conformity to Satan's likeness in pride that has occurred in them through their brokenheartedness. So it's very difficult for these people to admit weakness or even what they believe, because the deception is that the shortcomings that they are unaware that they carry are in fact only self-perceptions and are not true anyway. But they've built walls around this monument that they've set up to themselves to protect the image of acceptability and importance from being attacked. So very often these people present as harsh or very intense people. Perhaps even the my rights attitude that we find in society today comes under this extreme focus on self, possibly believing and fearing that nobody really considers that you're important or you have worth or you deserve protection or provision. So then you insist on and demand that you are looked after, hence the my rights kind of society that we have. Another issue that we have, the third one, is what we would call hermits and extroverts. So some people respond to rejection by hiding from people in order to avoid further rejection. Even if they're in company, they present as withdrawn and they don't want to say anything in case it's rejected. So in a sense, they've accepted that they are unacceptable and not good enough, and are therefore afraid to come out of their protective shell. Now, others will gravitate to wearing a mask and becoming, for example, the life of the party in order to be acceptable. When they go home, they're often emotionally exhausted from the effort to rise up and be what they perceive as necessary to be wanted and accepted by people. Others exhibit what is known as harmonizing behavior. And this usually occurs where they've learnt in childhood that they need to be whatever other people want them to be in order to receive acceptance. Now, this means that they never really have their own identity, and suppressing who they are to please others often leads to mental issues and maladies later in life. Some Christian commentators have suggested that problems such as Alzheimer's disease stems from these kinds of confusion about their identity beliefs, because they've never been able to be just simply who they are and be accepted for that. And I have witnessed that these components are certainly present on several occasions. All right, a fourth area is loneliness. Another result of rejection is poor bonding and the inability to make close relationships. So beliefs such as I'm not wanted, I don't belong, I'm not worthy or worth acceptance, I'm not cared about, and so on, presents a strong inner case for not receiving the affection of another, even yourself and even God. So we all really do need to hear, this is my child, in whom I am well pleased. While we cannot accept ourselves, we'll struggle to accept others as well. And this makes healing and freedom in this area a vital part of returning to God's perfect order and coming to wholeness. And Matthew 19:19, as we know, says, "You shall love your neighbour as yourself." Well, if you don't love yourself, there's a pretty good chance you'll struggle to love your neighbour too. Number 5, emotional immaturity. Some of us who are a bit older are what we would call digital immigrants. In fact, in other words, we had to come into the digital world from our old world, and we find ourselves in a world where if you can't get your smartphone to work, you ask a four-year-old how to set it up for you. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but oftentimes we do find by early teenage years that our children are very worldly wise on many fronts, including technology and things that we were never exposed to. Emotionally, however, they haven't had the opportunity to grow up slowly, and so they have not developed. So they have a lot of knowledge, but it's not balanced with emotional maturity, and much of this can be laid at the feet of insufficient parenting and nurture. Now, modern society and living standards now many times requires both husband and wife in the workplace to sustain lifestyles. Coupled with this is the phenomenon of children being overwhelmed with decisions that they're given and not really ready yet and equipped to make. And this is part of the My Right society. Children have rights, therefore we begin to give them decisions and make them responsible for their lives before they actually have the knowledge and understanding to cope. And I recall seeing a fast food advertisement on the television where a very small child was having to make one choice after another. The parents were saying, is it this kind of food time or this kind? Is it playtime or home time? And so on it went, with the child being asked all these questions and having to make all these decisions. This is a very small child. At this age, it is possibly better that they feel somebody's in control to say something like, sit up here and eat your dinner, then go and play for 10 minutes, and then we're going home. So we could say parenting is a little bit like having a length of rope. To begin with, your child is completely under your control because they don't have the capacity to make the decisions yet. And once they learn some self-control, you feed out a little bit more of the rope to them, and then letting them have more and more control. Now it's a mix of self-control and making decisions in some areas, and your control perhaps for bigger decisions. But finally, as they reach adulthood, you should only have a little bit of rope left, and now they have full control, and hopefully you've taught them enough self-control that they can survive the world. Now they having gradually learnt self-control, they can now take responsibility for choices. Now your job as a parent at that stage is finished, should be in a healthy relationship, and you can take up your role as a support and a friend. But if you give them all of the rope at the beginning and they're out of control, not having matured in self-control and knowledge, then there may be a problem. More commonly, trauma and abuse is also an area that arrests the normal development of emotion and emotional health, as the wounded child distances themselves from harmful identity beliefs that are inside them in order to cope with life. So it's kind of like an arrested, an emotional situation that's happening within them. There's areas of development that they just simply don't want to go to. Some people may come for ministry who still, as a result of this, feel and behave like a child in some ways, along with the beliefs about our identity and acceptability that are stored in our mind. Is the how do I respond when I'm hurt like this or in this particular way, and that information is also stored there. So this is why you see people at 40 years old or even more, they can have an argument with their spouse and they both walk away, and as they cool off they're thinking, wow, that was childish, we behaved like 8-year-olds. Now that's because in all probability that was where you first took in the belief about yourself that you reacted to when your spouse touched that belief or that button and triggered it, and also the response, which is now automatic, was learnt back there at that time. All right, in the next study we're going to look at fear of rejection, which is a major and highly prevalent anxiety issue in our society that is a direct result of having been rejected. So we'll see you soon.